Imagine seeing the person you love the most in your life, on an ordinary day, walk out the front door of your house, and then completely disappear. For months, no sign, no news, nothing at all. And then, only 6 months later, you finally get new information and even an image of that person. But in the worst way you could ever imagine. This is a true story about a Portuguese boy named Rui Pedro Teixeira Mendonça, who, at the age of 11, lived in a village called Lousada, a simple place in the region of Portugal. He lived with his parents, Manuel Mendonça and Filomena Teixeira. For the Teixeira Mendonça family, life had always been calm and free of worries. But one day, all of that would change completely. It was Wednesday at around 2 p.m. when Rui decided to use the time he had between lunch and school to ride his bicycle for a while. He wanted to go out with his close friend, who was also well known by the family, Afonso Dias, who was 21 years old at the time. Which, from the point of view of other people, would already be strange enough. A 21-year-old man spending time with a boy of only 11. But Afonso was well known by the family and even visited the Teixeira Mendonça household regularly. He was known by everyone for having a modest financial situation and for displaying somewhat childish behavior for his age. Well, on that particular day, Rui took his bicycle and went to his mother's workplace, which was right across from his house, and asked if he could go out with Afonso. Filomena refused, saying it was better for him to stay around, riding his bicycle in a quiet area behind her office, which was also a common place where children played. From there, Rui could go straight to school. But that's not what happened. Because shortly after, at around 6 p.m., Rui's mother was taken by surprise by a phone call from the school, informing her that Rui had not shown up that day. She was thrown into complete shock. Rui was never the kind of student to miss class, and nothing like this had ever happened before. So she quickly went to look for the boy, but couldn't find him. She informed friends and neighbors, and they began searching for the boy around the village. An elderly man who was a close neighbor appeared, saying that at around 3 p.m., just 1 hour after Rui had spoken with his mother, he found the boy's bicycle lying in a patch of tall grass, in a place where other witnesses had also seen Rui riding earlier. The strangest part is that the bicycle seemed to have been placed there on purpose, so it wouldn't be seen. With that, the family contacted the police, who, according to reports, handled the case with extreme unwillingness at several moments. The search for Rui went on throughout the entire night that day, but nothing was found. They had already lost a lot of time when, after only 1 day, the police officially declared the boy missing. By then, the family was already desperate and no longer knew what to do. The only option left was to question his friend, Afonso Dias. So they went straight after him to find out what he knew. According to the police themselves, when interrogated, Afonso was behaving in a rather strange way. At first, he showed surprise upon hearing that the boy had disappeared. He then answered with a certain calmness, saying that he knew nothing and that he hadn't seen the boy for days. However, other children who had been playing nearby were also questioned and revealed that they had seen Rui in the passenger seat of a black car that passed close by. And the driver of that car was Afonso Dias. Other people also reported having witnessed the same scene. It was discovered that the vehicle was actually a black Fiat Uno belonging to Afonso's brother, which, according to some sources, Afonso had supposedly borrowed to take the car for the government's annual inspection, even though there was no evidence that he had ever attended such an appointment. Another testimony then emerged, as everything was highly suspicious. Rui Pedro's grandfather confronted Afonso right outside the police station, demanding to know where his grandson was and even offering a large sum of money for him to tell the truth. And then Afonso began to cry, saying that he didn't know anything, but that if they wanted to find Rui, they should close all the borders. This statement led some people to believe that the boy might be being taken out of the country. But it was only with the testimony of Rui's cousin, João André Mendonça, that things escalated to a macabre proportion. João André revealed to the police that days before the disappearance, Afonso had invited Rui and him to go by car to meet a prostitute. On that occasion, João André said that he could not go that afternoon because his mother would not allow it. But he did not know whether Rui had been taken to the place. He also stated that ever since this chaos began, he had been threatened by Afonso not to make this information public. And to make matters worse, while João André was speaking to the police, Afonso for the first time showed himself to be upset, saying things like "shut up" or "stay out of it." Everything indicated that Afonso would indeed be fully involved in this. and that the problems would run much deeper. By this point, the family members were already imagining various horrible things, such as abduction, slavery, and homicide. Basically, overnight, their lives had turned into a complete nightmare. Believe it or not, even with all those reports against Afonso, he walked out of the police station free, as if nothing had happened. Because the officers chose to treat the case as a simple disappearance, like he had just gotten lost and would show up later, rather than as a kidnapping. According to the police, one reason for this was the lack of reliable leads. But to the family, it was clearly negligence. They would not have given up while their son could still be saved. Of course, it didn't take long for the case to draw people's attention, since child disappearances were not common there. So once the story appeared on TV and in the newspapers, many people also came forward, claiming to have information about Rui. Some of these people called claiming to have seen the boy in various places, but none of those reports led to any evidence. They even sent a video that supposedly showed the boy Rui in a hotel in Spain, but it was never confirmed to actually be him. The most striking account was of a specific phone call that Filomena received, in which there was a child on the other end of the line with a voice identical to Rui's, screaming and calling for his mother non-stop. The call didn't last long because apparently someone took the phone and hung up, but it was already enough for her to state with certainty that it was her son's voice. Yet, as frustrating as it was, the authorities handling the case never traced that call, which became the last straw for Rui's family, who began publicly criticizing the stance of the Portuguese authorities. 1 month after the boy's disappearance, a journalist who was on vacation at Disneyland Paris took a photo while riding a Pinocchio attraction with his family. Seated right behind him, he noticed a boy who closely resembled Rui, next to a bald man in a red jacket. There was an analysis of the photograph, but they couldn't reach a definitive conclusion. It seemed that nothing pointed to any concrete evidence about what might be happening with the boy. Well, that was at least until the 1st of September of that same year. That was when the American police uncovered a massive child sharing network known as the Wonderland Club. This international group consisted of collecting and exchanging files of children in horrific situations, organized in a secretive and highly restricted manner. To give you an idea, only a person recommended by another member could enter this community, and it was required that he contribute 10,000 files upon joining. It is horrifying to imagine that such a thing exists, and that in this 1998 operation alone, hundreds of thousands of media files were seized. Up to that point, the Wonderland Club had been the largest organized philanthropy scheme ever recorded in human history. And among the confiscated material, they found real photos of Rui. There was also a very horrific video of him being by several men. After a detailed analysis using a facial mapping program to recognize features, it was confirmed that the boy in the video was indeed Rui Pedro. Imagine the situation of the family, who had to follow this investigation, watch all those videos, and in the end face the devastating confirmation that, unfortunately, it was their son. With that, many believed he had probably been killed afterward, since his case was becoming increasingly popular. And because of this, the national police investigations, which were already slower than normal, ended up cooling down even further. But years went by, and Rui's family did not give up. In 2006, they finally decided to hire a private investigation team on their own, hoping that this way they could make some progress. And it was because of all that effort and the pressure from those following the case that several pieces of evidence were gathered, enough for Afonso to be formally charged. Years later, in 2011, a trial took place in court, with more than 50 witnesses heard. Among them was a woman named Alcina Diaz, who worked as an escort at the time of the crime, and whose face was never officially revealed. Alcina said she had tried to testify back when everything happened, but her account did not move forward. She explained that on the day of the incident, she was at her usual work spot, on a road at the edge of the city, when she remembers a man who identified himself as Afonso arriving by car with a young boy. According to Alcina, he wanted to pay her to have sex with a boy, but the child was terrified and crying. So she asked if his mother knew he was there, and he said no. At that point, she took Rui to a more private place and pretended that something had happened, just so the boy could leave. When she asked Afonso about the boy's age, he replied that he was old enough. Then he left with Rui in the car. Other people who were children at the time and were near where Rui was playing also testified, saying they remembered Afonso showing up there and approaching the boy. They also heard the account of Rui's younger sister, who said that a year before the incident, Afonso had taken several photos of her and her brother, which she even presented in court. The most unbelievable part is that after all this, Afonso was still acquitted due to lack of tangible evidence. But once again, the family appealed with a lawyer until Afonso was finally indicted for aggravated abduction. Only in 2014 was he sentenced to more than 3 years in prison based on Alcina's testimony. Even so, the court ruled that they could not convict Afonso for Rui's disappearance. Before being arrested, Afonso gave a television interview insisting that he was innocent, calmly stating that he did not regret anything in the process. He said that if he could do one thing differently, it would be never having gotten involved with the Teixeira Mendonça family, because now his life was being destroyed, and according to him, the real culprit would remain unpunished. The following year, in 2015, he was arrested and served only 2 years in prison, 1/3 of the sentence, because he was an inmate who maintained good behavior. The last update on the case was in 2018, when people filmed an adult Portuguese man of the age Rui would have been, who bore a strong physical resemblance to him and claimed his name was Pedro. But according to the authorities, the man was identified as merely a homeless person. It has now been 24 years since the day Rui asked to go for a bike ride and was never seen again. And ever since, his mother has still held hope of finding him. In 2019, Rui's presumed death was declared by the court, which, in other words, means that it is assumed the individual has died and there is no longer a need for searches. Even so, Rui's mother still keeps his room exactly the way it was on the day he left, and she remembers her son every day.
In a letter published in the newspaper Terras do Vale do Souza, Filomena wrote, "And now, at 33 years old, what do you look like? How are you? Congratulations, my son, wherever you are, receiving this tight hug that is so ours, and many kisses. I will wait for you until eternity. I will never give up searching for you."
Nunca vou desistir de o procurar.